I know for a fact I've said that Ohio State has had the most talented wide receiver room in college football history at least once, probably 2 or 3 times before I've made this video. But the fact of the matter is that Brian Hartline and Ryan Day continue to recruit better, bigger, faster, and stronger at wide receiver than they have ever before. So this video, believe me, is warranted. There have been 2 hallmark places, 2 big, bold print, italicized, underlined positions that are noticed and talked about at Ohio State, and that they are the reason Ohio State has its current reputation. And those are quarterback and wide receiver. That's what Ryan Day's been known for at Ohio State, is quarterback and wide receiver. Dwayne Haskins, Justin Fields, CJ Stroud, all first-round picks. All of them. And CJ Stroud, depending on what happens and if the Bears trade or whatnot, and heck, maybe even the Bears want to draft a new QB. I don't think they should, because Justin Fields is phenomenal, but they're ruining him and their organization just seems to be clueless. Anyway, I don't know much of anything about the NFL, I admit. And at the same time, CJ Stroud, he could be the number 1 overall pick. He very well could be. And I think after that Georgia game, after that Peach Bowl matchup in which Ohio State had the lead, they lost by a point. I think he made his case to be the number 1 overall pick, or at least to be the top quarterback picked in the 2023 NFL draft. But speaking of 2023, in college football, we have to talk about this wide receiver room. You just have to. Any wide receiver room that has had 2 top 10 leaders in receiving yards, and all of their starters are coming back, has to be discussed. You just have to do it. There's no other option. Marvin Harrison Jr., Julian Fleming, Emeka Egbuka, all of them 5 stars or high 4 stars. Let me tell you something. They all play like 5 stars that are coached by the nation's best wide receivers coach. And Xavier Johnson, who's a specialist on special teams, who's played snaps at running back and wide receiver as well, they return next year. All of them do. Marvin Harrison Jr., Julian Fleming, Emeka Egbuka, obviously being the 3-headed hydra that can tear apart any secondary they face at any given moment. And let's not forget guys like Caleb Brown, Jalen Ballard, again, Xavier Johnson, and we also can't forget, I'm listing names here, and it might sound ridiculous and excessive, but all these guys, except for, I think, Xavier Johnson, who I think was a 3-star or a walk-on, correct me if I'm wrong, everyone else in that wide receiver room is either a mid-tier 4-star coming out of high school or a 5-star or anything in between. You have Caleb Brown, Kyan Graves. I already mentioned, there's Caleb Burton as well, Kojo Antwi. In the class that's coming in for 2023, you have Brandon Innes, who's a 5-star. You have Carnell Tate, and you have Noah Rogers. 3 out of 4 of Ohio State's top commits for the 2023 class are wide receivers. All of them are top 60 players. All of them. It really is absolutely insane, to be honest with you. The depth that this wide receiver room has and will have, as Ohio State already has the number 1 wide receiver in the class of 2024 locked down in Jeremiah Smith, it's impressive. Brian Hartline, who's now obviously, as we all know, he's promoted to be the offensive coordinator, getting a hefty raise. He'll get some additional oversight and responsibility when it comes to on and off the field work. He is just, call it what it is. He's a hardworking, impressive, elite position coach. And I think no matter who you're a fan of, it's impressive and it's encouraging to see that that man's hard work is being rewarded. Certainly. This team is deep everywhere, but especially at wide receiver. CJ Stroud is gone, and the entire world is panicking. Whether it's Steve Dace, who is saying, and he said it in his most recent Bigger Ten podcast, that Ohio State very likely could lose 3 games, I think maybe even more. Whether it's some national pundits who are questioning whether Kyle McCord or Devin Brown can be good, all these other things. Listen, Ohio State's lost to Michigan 2 years in a row, which makes me very happy because I'm a Wolverine fan. I was shaking my fist and yelling at the TV for the past 2 editions of the game and laughing as I saw my team run for like what is seemingly 1,000 yards against a collection of 5 stars on a defense that once had plenty of pride to it. But just because Ryan Day's lost to Michigan for the past 2 years, just because he lost to Georgia in the Peach Bowl, lost to Oregon last year in what was a debacle, got blown out by Bama in 2020, and lost to Clemson in 2019, all everyone's looking at are the 6 losses. They're not looking at the 45 wins. They're not looking at the elite QB development. They're not looking at the great wide receiver development. I think all of that is asinine. For example, Drew Aller is getting benefit of the doubt when it comes to Penn State's starting QB, but Kyle McCord and Devin Brown are being met with questions. Alabama and their presumed starting QB, Jalen Milroe, or maybe it'll be Ty Simpson, who was a 5-star, they're getting benefit of the doubt. Nick Saban has it figured out at Alabama with quarterbacks, even though they don't even have an OC yet Kyle McCord and Devin Brown are questioned. I say all this to say that Ohio State, in my opinion, isn't going anywhere, and this wide receiver room is basically, in my opinion, proof of that. Because as we saw with CJ Stroud early in 2021 when he was struggling, he still had the wide receivers to carry him even when he was in his own head and even when his shoulder was busted. He could still throw for 400 yards. And Marvin Harrison Jr., Julian Fleming, Emeka Egbuka, and also Cade Stover's back too. So your best receiving threats are all back. They're going to get a whole preseason of work. And I don't know what to tell you. I mean, that along with the fact that Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson are back and that they're not going to be as banged up as they were last year. That was an anomaly to have them injured as much as they were. The concern for Ohio State really revolves around tackle play and pass pro. That's it. Quarterback, wide receivers, running back, tight end, I would say is pretty set. And returning Matthew Jones and Donovan Jackson, maybe a little bit of a bold prediction here, but that could be one of the best guard duos in the nation. I'd say Zach Zinner and Trevor Keegan would be the only guard duo, to my knowledge, that would definitely be ahead of them. But that's the offense as a whole. I really want to lean in on this wide receiver room. All these guys have potentially NFL futures. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr., you could spend, if like we had film in front of us, or if I had film in front of me, and I mean, we could spend like an hour just talking about how good he is, how elite he is. There's an argument that's very valid that he should have won the Biletnikoff Award over Jalen Hyatt. And I think he is the better wide receiver than Hyatt. Now, Hyatt had the better performance, having 5 receiving touchdowns against, Alabama. I almost forgot mentioning Alabama because that program this past season, in a certain sense, was forgettable. Ever since they lost that game to Tennessee and LSU, everyone just kind of forgot about them until they blew out Kansas State. But Ohio State, I don't think, on offense or in the passing game is going anywhere. And these wide receivers are the reason why. It's as simple as that. When you have 2 receivers who have over 1,000 yards and they're coming back, That's crazy. It's crazy talk when you have that. Marvin Harrison Jr. He's had 77 receptions, 1,263 yards, 14 touchdowns, and he's averaged 16.4 yards per reception. Emeka Egbuka, 74 receptions, 1,152 yards, 10 receiving touchdowns. I apologize for that error on the screen. And he's averaged 15.6 yards per reception. And you have Julian Fleming, 34 receptions, 533 yards, 6 touchdowns, and he's averaged 15.7 yards per reception. When it comes to yards per reception, all of these wide receivers are in the top 90 of that category. Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr. are both top 15 in receiving touchdowns, top 10 in receiving yards. This offense was ranked number 1 in efficiency for the second year in a row. 2021, it was also number 1 in efficiency. And that offense, the defense too, at least for the first 11, 10 games, looked phenomenal, looked elite. And I look at Ohio State and I look at the fact that they return this 3-headed Hydra, and look at Jackson Smith-Njigba. That's the lesson of the Hydra. Cut off one head, 2 more grow. Jackson Smith-Njigba was injured, and yes, if both him and Marvin Harrison Jr. were on the field and healthy the whole time, I don't think Georgia even has a chance to win that game, but injuries happen. You cut out Jackson Smith-Njigba from the equation, Julian Fleming popped out, Xavier Johnson popped out and had himself some good moments, and if there's a catastrophic injury that happens in 2023, just look at all the names that I listed to you in the 2023, 2022 recruiting classes that will all be on the roster. Presumably, some of them could transfer out, of course, entering the 2023 season. Whether it's Caleb Brown, Kyan Graves, Caleb Burton, Kojo Antwi, Brandon Innes. I mean, there's so many names, so much talent. Carnell Tate, Noah Rogers. Carnell Tate chose Ohio State over Tennessee, who they themselves, Cedric Tillman, Jalen Hyatt, they've produced solid wide receivers. Both of them, I think, have futures in the NFL. This wide receiver room, looking at it from a raw talent perspective, is probably the most talented wide receiver room, according to high school ranking, in college football history. You have easily 2 NFL-level wide receivers in Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka. Marvin Harrison Jr. being a guy who I think, first-team All-Pro wide receiver. And he's playing college football for another year. The veterancy, the returning production, the fact that Ohio State's offense, they tried to get it going with the run game last year, but with Ryan Day, their identity is always going to be passing and catching the ball. Always going to be that way. Their identity will never be running for 400 yards. To make a comparison, what Michigan did against Penn State last year, rushing for 400 yards, Ohio State will never do that. Now, on the flip side, Michigan will never pass for 560 yards in a Rose Bowl and win in a shootout when your defense absolutely fails you. Michigan can't do that in the same way that Ohio State can. They can't rush for 400 yards in a game. It's not their identity. Nor should they force that. And that was... I'm a Michigan fan. I'm not an Ohio State fan. But when watching football, you want to see good football. You want to see good play calls. And the times where Ryan Day, whether it was this year or last year, and you're trying to force an identity of being physical and running the football, it's like, what? What? Look at the wide receiver talent you have. You could chuck 50-50 balls all day and still finish ranked as a top 10 team with all that talent at wide receiver. I mean, what secondary has shut down? What secondary has shut down that wide receiver room? What team has shut down that wide receiver room? I mean, the closest thing to shutting down Ohio State's wide receiver room that we've seen in the Ryan Day era. I mean, if you wanted to say that Pat Fitzgerald called on, quote unquote, the gods to bring wind so that CJ Stroud couldn't throw, then maybe you could make that claim. But no one has shut down that passing game. You can limit it. You can force them to throw for 5-6 yards per passing attempt, slow them down, force them to chew clock, make them uncomfortable, but you can't stop the inevitable. The inevitable being that one of Ohio State's wide receivers, look, in 2021 Michigan, it was Garrett Wilson when he burned Michigan's secondary for a long touchdown early in the game. It was Marvin Harrison Jr. against Michigan in 2022. It was tight end Cade Stover against Penn State after a fumble recovery that was forced by JT Tuimoloau in 2022. It was Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith-Njigba against Michigan State in 2021. It was Julian Fleming against Iowa late in the game in 2022. These wide receivers, deep, middle, short, perimeter, in the middle of the field, I don't care where it is, they're a threat. They're a threat. And with what Ohio State returns on defense too, I want to mention that I don't think that this team is going anywhere. But this wide receiver room has so much talent to it. They run their routes well. They're all built. They all have size. All of them weigh more than 200 pounds. All of them are 6'1" at minimum. Marvin Harrison Jr. is 6'4". They all have good speed. Again, they're all big, physical, fast, disciplined, well-developed. I mean, you could put John O'Korn at quarterback and make him look like a Heisman QB with this wide receiver room and with Ryan Day's schemes. So Ohio State, they're not just safe in general. This segment might have seemed like me talking about Ohio State as a whole team, and to a certain degree I was, but also I was mainly trying to focus around their wide receiver room, because the wide receiver room is a big, big part of any Ryan Day Ohio State team. It always will be. Whether Brian Hartline is there as the wide receivers coach or whether he moves on, the way that Ohio State plays ball now is all about quarterback and wide receiver play. Those are the main anchor points. And those are the reasons why sometimes in Big Ten play and sometimes against more physical Big Ten teams or against teams that are just more physical and ball control and run the ball, sometimes they struggle against those teams. But it's also the reason why they hung 41 points on Georgia and nearly beat Georgia by double digits, because that's what you get with these kind of teams. With these teams that are super modern, that can pass, that have all the talent in the world. Talent is obviously a huge factor of it, but these schemes, Ohio State, like as Mike Valeni said on 97 Won the Ticket, they are the team that in the Big Ten, long term, has by far the best chance to win a national title because of the way they play football, the way they recruit, the way they develop, especially at wide receiver. Listen, with Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr., those are two guys who could win the Biletnikoff Award next year. Two. On the same roster. In the same way that, Michigan might, there's a possibility that Michigan could have the number 1 and number 2 running back in the nation. Ohio State might have the number 1 and number 2 wide receiver. Maybe. Maybe not, but there's certainly a case for it with Brian Hartline coaching them and with Ryan Day's reputation at quarterbacks. Kyle McCord, 5-star quarterback out of high school. He has an arm. He's accurate. He's improved from last year into 2022 and will definitely improve from 2022 into 2023. And I mention him because he's the presumed starter. All I'm saying in this segment is that you're not going to stop the passing game. I don't see how Ohio State is going to lose 3 games next year. Could it happen? Yes, but I'm going to address that separately in another video because I think it's a bold prediction by many, and I want to directly address it because I disagree with it. But most importantly, just look at the numbers. Look at the statistics. Look at the on-field talent, the coaching, the returning production at wide receiver, and every game you will see multiple receiving touchdowns. Every game. It's just what Ryan Day does so well. It's what Brian Hartline does so well. And with improvements from Justin Fry on the offensive line, that obviously helps give the quarterback more time to throw, means he can throw more accurately. And just the whole system, the whole coaching staff, it's all designed to get these quarterbacks and wide receivers and give them the best opportunity to be successful, to put up good numbers, and to put Ohio State in a position to win via the passing game. And with Marvin Harrison Jr., Julian Fleming, Emeka Egbuka, Xavier Johnson, Brandon Innes, Caleb Brown, Jalen Ballard, Kojo Antwi, with Carnell Tate, name them all. All of these guys are going to Ohio State or attending Ohio State, and they're willing to be third on the depth chart because one day you can become like Julian Fleming, who is going to be a senior in 2023, and he's battled injuries, he's battled adversity, and he's going to be one of the nation's best wide receivers because of the wide receiver room he's in and because the head coach and wide receivers coach and offensive coordinator that he has. So this room, last year, it possibly was the most talented wide receiver room in college football history. The year before that, possibly. And once again, for the 3rd year in a row, Ohio State is saying, hey, we set the record last year. We're gonna break that record and set a new one. And they're just going to keep developing, and they're going to keep manufacturing these wide receivers who play at an elite level of football. Again, I'm going to talk about Ohio State as a whole in a coming video because I think that them, Penn State, Michigan, all have a great chance to win the Big Ten and punch their ticket to the college football playoff. But Ohio State is receiving a lot of skepticism in the same way that a lot of teams are. Alabama, I know, is certainly going to receive some skepticism, and rightfully so. Michigan might even receive some skepticism too after, the NCAA violations and all these other things, along with Matt Weiss being fired. So skepticism isn't a bad thing. It's just whether you agree with it, disagree with it, but I do want to address it. So hit the notification bell if you want to see my video that talks about that. If you want to see more talk on Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, even Indiana, Wisconsin, Iowa, just Big Ten football and college football in general, I encourage you to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell, and comment your thoughts on this video down below. Ohio State, listen, their offense next year is going to be humming. I don't care what anyone says, and it's because of that wide receiver room. You cannot ignore returning production and good coaching. You just can't do it. And those two pieces are like eyeballs coming out of sockets looking at you and saying, we have all the returning production, we have all the coaching, and you don't have the returning production at quarterback, but you have the developer at quarterback, and you have the talent at quarterback to feed those wide receivers the ball. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all around. Bye.